In the summer of 1999, the town of Fairview, a quiet community in the Canadian prairies, was shaken to its core. Rosana, a bright and ambitious 22-year-old woman, vanished without a trace. She wasn't a troubled runaway, nor someone living on the margins. She was a daughter, a sister, a student with plans, and a friend loved by many. Her disappearance would soon become one of the most baffling, unsolved mysteries in the region. That year, Fairview was the kind of town where doors were rarely locked, and people still waved at each other on the street. Life was predictable, almost comforting. Rosana embodied that normalcy. She worked part-time at a local bookstore while finishing her degree at the community college. Her friends described her as cheerful, responsible, and a dreamer who often spoke about traveling abroad. Nothing about her life suggested she was about to vanish. On July 17, 1999, Rosana left her family home around 6 p.m. She told her parents she was meeting friends for coffee and promised to be home later that night. She wore a light summer dress, carried a small purse, and drove away in her blue compact car. It was the last time anyone in her family would ever see her. When midnight came and Rosana still hadn't returned, her mother grew uneasy. By dawn, panic had set in. Calls to friends revealed that none of them had seen Rosana that evening. No one had arranged to meet her. She had simply vanished. Her car was missing, her phone rang unanswered, and her absence was as sudden as it was inexplicable. The initial response was swift. Local police organized a search, tracing her most likely routes and questioning neighbors. Flyers with her photo, long dark hair, warm smile, eyes filled with life, were distributed throughout Fairview and neighboring towns. Volunteers scoured fields, wooded areas, and riverbanks. Helicopters scanned from above while divers searched nearby lakes. But there was nothing, not a single piece of evidence. The absence of clues only deepened the mystery. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses who reported seeing her after she left home, and no clear reason for her disappearance. Theories began to swirl. Some whispered she had chosen to run away, though her family firmly denied it. Others suspected a stranger had intercepted her on the road. A few even speculated she had been lured into a trap by someone she trusted. For Rosana's parents, every hour without news was torture. Her father drove the highways endlessly, searching for any sign of her car. Her mother sat by the phone, unable to move, hoping for the call that never came. The family home turned into a command center, walls covered with maps and notes, desperate attempts to connect dots that weren't there. By the end of the first week, it was clear. Rosana's disappearance was not a misunderstanding. It was a mystery, one that would haunt Fairview for decades, and one that would only begin to unravel years later with a discovery so shocking it would leave everyone silent. To understand Rosana's disappearance, investigators focused on her final known hours. July 17, 1999, began like any other Saturday in Fairview. The summer sun lingered late, and the streets buzzed with the hum of families, teenagers, and neighbors enjoying the long evening light. By all accounts, Rosana seemed perfectly normal that day, nothing to suggest the shadow that was about to fall over her life. That morning, she worked a short shift at the local bookstore. Co-workers recalled her cheerfully discussing an upcoming family barbecue and laughing about how she had promised to bring her famous homemade dessert. She was seen leaving the shop around 2 p.m., smiling, purse in hand, and mentioning casually that she would be free the rest of the weekend. Back home, she spent the afternoon with her younger sister, helping her with a school project. Around 5:30 p.m., she dressed in a light floral summer dress, carried a small brown purse, and told her parents she was heading out to meet friends for coffee. She seemed calm, relaxed, and in no hurry. But this is where the trail began to fracture. The friends Rosana was supposedly meeting later confirmed that no such plans had been made. They hadn't expected her that evening. This revelation puzzled her family and investigators alike. Why would Rosana say she was meeting friends if she wasn't? Was it simply a polite excuse, Or had she intended to meet someone else, someone she didn't want her parents to know about? At approximately 6:15 p.m., Rosana's blue compact car was spotted leaving town by a gas station attendant who knew her. He recalled her stopping briefly, though oddly, he could not remember if she had purchased anything. He only remembered her polite wave as she drove away. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Later that night, around 9 p.m., a farmer living on the outskirts of Fairview reported seeing a small blue car parked near an old service road leading into the woods. The description matched Rosana's vehicle, but when investigators searched the area days later, there was nothing. No car, no tracks, no evidence she had ever been there. The contradictions piled up. Rosana had told her parents one thing, her friends another, and her actions suggested something entirely different. Some investigators theorized she had planned to meet someone secretly, a boyfriend perhaps, or even a stranger she had recently met. Others suggested she might have been tricked into going somewhere under false pretenses. Her parents insisted she had no enemies, no hidden life, no reason to disappear willingly. Her room remained tidy, her belongings untouched, her passport and money left behind. Every detail pointed to the same chilling conclusion. Rosana had intended to come home but never got the chance. By midnight, when she failed to return, her family knew something was terribly wrong. The hours following would launch one of the most desperate searches Fairview had ever seen, and the first seeds of a mystery that would grow darker with every passing day. When Rosana failed to come home on the night of July 17, 1999, her family wasted no time. At first light the next morning, her father drove the main highways leading in and out of Fairview, scanning ditches, rest areas, and side roads. Her mother called every friend and relative she could think of, clinging to the hope that Rosana had simply stayed out late or gone somewhere unexpected. But as each call ended with the same answer, no one had seen her, panic began to take root. By noon, the family contacted the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Officers arrived quickly, taking statements and gathering details. Rosana's description, 22 years old, long dark hair, medium build, last seen in a floral summer dress, was distributed to patrol units across Manitoba. Her vehicle, a small blue compact car, was also added to the missing bulletin. What began as a routine missing persons report escalated rapidly. Rosana's absence was out of character, and there was no evidence to suggest she had left willingly. Friends vouched for her stability, her optimism, and her closeness with her family. Her employer confirmed she had future shifts scheduled at the bookstore. Everything pointed toward foul play. Within 48 hours, the first organized search began. Dozens of volunteers joined RCMP officers as they combed through fields, wooded areas, and gravel roads on the outskirts of town. Helicopters circled above, their spotlights sweeping across farmland. Search dogs were brought in, sniffing along the service road where a farmer had reported seeing a blue car on the night of Rosana's disappearance. But despite the effort, nothing surfaced. No car, no purse, no trace of Rosana. The lack of evidence was deeply unsettling. Normally, investigators might find discarded belongings, tire tracks, or even subtle signs of disturbance in the soil. But in Rosana's case, it was as if she had driven into the evening and vanished. As days turned into a week, the search intensified. Posters with Rosana's photograph, her bright smile framed by long dark hair, were plastered across shop windows, post offices, and telephone poles. The local news covered the case nightly, urging anyone with information to come forward. The town of Fairview, once quiet and predictable, was now gripped by fear. Parents warned their children not to walk alone. Strangers were eyed with suspicion. The RCMP widened their scope, expanding searches to rivers and lakes within a 50-kilometer radius. Divers plunged into murky waters, hoping to find Rosana's vehicle submerged. Roadblocks were set up along major highways to question travelers. Each effort ended the same way: silence. For Rosana's family, the waiting was unbearable. Her father continued to drive endless loops around the region, searching for anything unusual. Her mother sat by the phone, waiting for a call that never came. Friends organized prayer vigils, lighting candles outside the bookstore where Rosana had worked. The town's grief became collective, as though everyone had lost someone of their own. By the end of the second week, one truth was unavoidable. Rosana had not simply wandered away. Something had happened. But with no evidence, no witnesses, and no answers, the case that had started with urgency now teetered on the edge of uncertainty, planting the seeds of a mystery that would only deepen with time. As the weeks passed without answers, the atmosphere in Fairview grew heavy with fear and speculation. Rosana's face was everywhere, on flyers, in newspapers, and on nightly television updates, but the silence from investigators was deafening. No car, no purse, no signs of struggle. It was as though she had driven into the night and vanished into thin air. When evidence refused to appear, theories quickly filled the void. The most common explanation was the one investigators leaned on: foul play. Many believed Rosana had been intercepted while driving. Perhaps someone flagged her down, or she stopped to help a stranger, only to be taken by force. The fact that her vehicle had never been recovered only strengthened this possibility. Cars could be hidden, stripped, or even driven across provincial lines. If she had been abducted, her disappearance might have been carefully planned. Others whispered about darker possibilities. Could Rosana have been targeted by someone she knew? Friends and family insisted she had no enemies, no history of conflict. But detectives always looked first at those closest to the victim. Investigators questioned her co-workers, her classmates, and even her family members. Every alibi was checked, every relationship scrutinized. Nothing incriminating emerged, but suspicion lingered in the air. A second theory suggested Rosana might have left willingly. Maybe she wanted a new life, away from the small town. After all, she often spoke about traveling, about seeing the world beyond the prairies. Could she have used her disappearance as a way to escape? Her parents refused to believe it. Rosana had left behind money, clothing, even her passport. And more importantly, she loved her family deeply. Nothing in her behavior hinted at plans to run away. The lack of answers also gave rise to rumors. Strange, unsettling, and sometimes cruel. Some townsfolk claimed to have seen her near the service road days later, though none of these sightings were ever confirmed. Others speculated about a connection to transients passing through the area, or even suggested her disappearance might be tied to larger unsolved cases across Canada. In a town desperate for meaning, every story, no matter how improbable, spread like wildfire. As months passed, the case grew colder, and the theories grew wilder. People spoke of Rosana in whispers at the grocery store, in hushed conversations at church. She became both a memory and a mystery, her smiling face printed on yellowing flyers that still clung to telephone poles. For her family, the speculation was torture. They clung to hope, but each rumor chipped away at their strength. Her father continued to drive the highways, searching for the blue car. Her mother prayed every night, refusing to let go of the belief that Rosana was still alive somewhere. By the end of 1999, one thing was clear. The investigation had stalled. Leads dried up, tips went nowhere, and the trail grew colder with each passing day. Yet the questions persisted. Had Rosana been taken? Had she left? Or was something far stranger at play? Theories would continue to swirl for years. But the truth, as Fairview would one day learn, was far more shocking than anyone had ever imagined. By the year 2000, the posters with Rosana's smiling face had begun to fade on Fairview's lampposts, their edges curled by wind and rain. The case that had once gripped the town with urgency now carried the weight of silence. The RCMP had exhausted their leads, and while her file remained open, resources were quietly redirected elsewhere. For Rosana's family, this abandonment felt like betrayal. For the town, it was a wound that never healed. Her father, once tireless in his daily drives searching the highways, slowed with time, but never stopped completely. Each weekend, he would choose a new route, scanning ditches, abandoned barns, and remote service roads, hoping for even the smallest clue. Her mother remained anchored to the house, the phone always within reach, clinging to the faint hope that Rosana might call, or that investigators might bring news. Each ring sent her heart racing, only for disappointment to follow. The community tried to move forward, but Rosana's absence lingered like a shadow. At the bookstore where she had worked, a small framed photograph of her sat behind the counter. Each holiday, her co-workers lit a candle beside it. At the local college, professors remembered her as the student who never got the chance to graduate. For her younger sister, the pain was sharper still. Milestones that should have been shared were now hollow, her confidant and best friend forever missing. Through the early 2000s, scattered tips would occasionally breathe brief life into the case. A reported sighting in Winnipeg. An anonymous letter mailed to the RCMP claiming knowledge of her whereabouts. A phone call from someone who insisted Rosana was alive in another province. Each lead was investigated, each one collapsed. The false hope left scars deeper than silence. As the years dragged on, theories hardened into folklore. Some said Rosana's car had sunk into one of the countless lakes that dotted Manitoba, its secret buried beneath layers of silt and ice. Others whispered that she had been taken by someone passing through, a trucker perhaps, or a stranger who vanished as quickly as she had. A few leaned toward darker speculation, convinced someone in Fairview itself knew more than they admitted. The police case file grew thicker, but not clearer. Every page was a reminder of hours spent chasing ghosts, and every dead end widened the void of uncertainty. The detectives who had once promised the family answers eventually rotated out, replaced by new officers unfamiliar with Rosana beyond the grainy photo stapled to the front of her file. For the family, the silence was the most punishing. Birthdays came and went. Holidays passed in muted tones. At every family gathering, an empty chair remained at the table, a symbol of their refusal to let Rosana's memory fade. By 2005, 6 years had passed. The case was no closer to resolution, and hope had become fragile, stretched thin by the relentless weight of time. But beneath the stillness of those years, evidence was waiting. Something hidden, buried, and preserved. And when it finally surfaced, it would shatter the silence and force Fairview to confront the truth they had long feared. By 2006, nearly 7 years had passed since Rosana's disappearance, and Fairview had grown used to living in the shadow of unanswered questions. Then, unexpectedly, strange clues began to surface. Small, almost fragile pieces of information that reignited the mystery and unsettled the entire community. The first came from a truck driver traveling through rural Manitoba. While stopping at a rest area, he noticed a small leather purse wedged between 2 boards of an old picnic table. Inside was nothing but dust, but the initials RS were faintly embossed on the inner lining. The RCMP collected the purse, and Rosana's parents confirmed it looked strikingly similar to the one she had carried on the day she disappeared. Forensic testing was inconclusive. Time and weather had erased any traces of fingerprints or DNA. Still, for the family, it was a spark of hope. Was this Rosana's purse? Had she been there? Not long after, another unsettling report surfaced. A hiker exploring a wooded area near an abandoned service road claimed to have found scraps of fabric tangled in the branches of a bush. The fabric was floral, faded but still visible in pattern, and it bore an uncanny resemblance to the summer dress Rosana had been wearing the night she vanished. Once again, testing offered no certainty, but the similarity was impossible to ignore. Each discovery deepened the mystery. Were these items genuine remnants of Rosana's last night? Or were they coincidences, magnified by desperation? For investigators, the timing was suspicious. Why would these clues suddenly emerge after years of silence? Had someone been keeping them hidden all along, only to place them now? Theories multiplied. Some believed these discoveries were deliberate, perhaps the work of someone involved, planting breadcrumbs to taunt investigators. Others wondered if Rosana herself had tried to leave a trail that went unnoticed for years. The purse, the fabric, the strange locations, they seemed almost too pointed to be chance. Adding to the tension, an anonymous letter arrived at the RCMP station. Written in shaky handwriting, it read simply, "You are looking in the wrong places. The truth is buried deeper than you think." No signature, no return address, no further detail. Police dismissed it as a cruel hoax, but Rosana's family couldn't shake the feeling that someone out there knew far more than they were saying. For the town of Fairview, the reappearance of clues reopened old wounds. Candlelight vigils resumed, the community once again divided between hope and despair. Parents warned their children to stay close, while rumors of a predator in their midst spread through quiet conversations. By 2008, nearly a decade since her disappearance, the investigation was at a crossroads. The purse, the fabric, the letter, all compelling, but none conclusive. They were fragments of a story still incomplete, scattered pieces of a puzzle no one could solve. And then, years later, came the moment no one expected. A discovery so undeniable, so shocking, that it would rewrite everything the town thought it knew about Rosana's fate. It was the spring of 2009, nearly 10 years after Rosana's disappearance, when the case suddenly cracked open. A group of forestry workers, surveying land on the outskirts of Fairview for a new logging project, stumbled upon something they would never forget. Deep in the woods, half buried under layers of soil and tangled roots, they found a small metal box. It was rusted, its hinges stiff with age, but inside lay items that would shake the investigation to its core. The box contained a handful of personal belongings, a faded photograph of Rosana with her younger sister, a keychain with a tiny silver locket, and most chilling of all, her student ID card from the community college. The photo on the card, though water-damaged, was unmistakable. Rosana's face, frozen in time from 1999. Investigators rushed to the site, cordoning off the area. Forensic teams combed through the soil, searching for more. Just a few feet away, partially concealed under moss, they found a shoe. It was worn, discolored by years of exposure, but Rosana's parents identified it instantly. It matched the pair she had been wearing the night she vanished. The discovery made national headlines. After a decade of silence, there was finally proof, real, undeniable proof, that Rosana had not simply run away or disappeared into thin air. She had been here, in these woods, and someone had hidden her belongings deliberately. For the family, the discovery was both a breakthrough and a torment. On one hand, it was validation. Rosana had not abandoned them. On the other, it raised darker questions. Who had buried her things? Why here in such a remote place? And where was Rosana herself? The RCMP reopened the case with renewed urgency. They searched the surrounding area extensively, bringing in cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, and excavation teams. Yet, despite days of digging, no human remains were found. Only fragments of fabric, rusted metal, and faint traces of what might have been campfires decades earlier. Speculation surged once again. Some believed Rosana had been taken into the woods against her will, her belongings buried to erase evidence. Others wondered if she had tried to flee from someone, discarding items as she ran before something or someone caught up with her. The most unsettling theory was that the person who had buried the box was still alive, still walking among them. For Fairview, the discovery reignited fear. Old suspicions resurfaced, whispers pointing fingers at neighbors, co-workers, even strangers who had passed through town in 1999. The sense of safety Fairview once knew was gone for good. Yet, as haunting as the discovery was, it marked a turning point. After years of silence, Rosana's case was no longer a fading memory. It was alive again, burning with new urgency, forcing everyone to confront the possibility that the answers had always been closer than they wanted to believe. And as investigators dug deeper, they began to uncover even more disturbing evidence. Hints that Rosana's fate was tied to something far more sinister than anyone had imagined. The discovery of Rosana's belongings in 2009 jolted the investigation back to life. For the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the rusted box and scattered items were the first concrete evidence in a decade, and they could no longer treat the case as a simple cold file. A new task force was assembled, blending veteran detectives who remembered the case from 1999 with younger officers armed with modern forensic tools. The first priority was the wooded site where the box had been found. Excavation teams scoured the area with precision. Cadaver dogs were brought in to sniff for human remains, but their signals were inconsistent. Ground-penetrating radar revealed irregularities in the soil, yet digging produced nothing definitive, only broken branches, old fire pits, and traces of disturbed earth that could have been caused by anything over the years. Still, the evidence inside the box was enough to confirm what Rosana's family had always believed. She had not left voluntarily. Someone had taken her belongings and buried them deliberately. Investigators theorized that the box had been placed there as a kind of cache, perhaps by the very person responsible for her disappearance. Attention turned back to suspects. The RCMP re-interviewed Rosana's friends, co-workers, and even family members, looking for inconsistencies. People who had once been cleared were questioned again. Detectives combed through old tip lines, re-examining calls that had been dismissed years earlier. The anonymous letter from 2006, "The truth is buried deeper than you think," suddenly felt more ominous. Could it have been a direct reference to the box? Technology also allowed for progress. The scraps of fabric found near the service road years earlier were retested, this time with more advanced DNA techniques. The results confirmed they carried traces consistent with Rosana's profile. The fragments that once seemed uncertain were now undeniable. Rosana had been there, she had been close, and someone had ensured she would not be found. The investigation also revisited the last confirmed sighting of her car. For years, it had been one of the great mysteries. Where had it gone? With renewed media attention, tips began to pour in again. One stood out. A retired farmer claimed that in the early 2000s, long after the initial searches had ended, he had seen a blue compact car abandoned near a quarry outside town. At the time, he thought little of it. Abandoned vehicles weren't uncommon. But now, he wondered if it could have been Rosana's. Investigators rushed to the quarry, but 2 decades of erosion and development had erased all traces. For Rosana's parents, the reopened case was bittersweet. They finally had proof, but not closure. The new discoveries reignited their grief, reopening wounds they had struggled to carry for 10 years. Yet it also gave them something precious. Validation. Their daughter's memory was not fading. The world still cared. And then, just when it seemed the case might stall again, came the most haunting revelation yet. An object uncovered in the woods that would change the investigation forever. The breakthrough came in late 2010, more than a year after Rosana's belongings had been unearthed. Investigators, determined not to let the trail fade again, continued combing the wooded area near the original discovery site. It was during one of these follow-up searches that a detective spotted something unusual, metal glinting faintly beneath a tangle of roots and leaves. What they uncovered was a rusted wristwatch. The band was broken, the face cracked, but etched on the back was a single name: Rosana. Her parents confirmed it immediately. It had been a birthday gift from her father just months before she vanished. The watch was unmistakably hers. Near the watch, partially buried under soil and stone, investigators also found bones. Forensic analysis confirmed they were human. Though degraded after more than a decade, DNA testing revealed the heartbreaking truth. The remains belonged to Rosana. The discovery devastated her family, but it also provided the closure they had begged for. Rosana was gone, but at last, they knew where she had been. And yet, as investigators studied the scene more carefully, disturbing details emerged. The condition of the bones suggested they had not been lying undisturbed since 1999. Instead, soil analysis indicated they had been moved, relocated at some point years after her death. Someone had buried her here deliberately and not immediately after her disappearance. The chilling implication was clear. Whoever was responsible had returned, perhaps more than once, to hide their crime. This revelation reframed everything. The purse, the scraps of fabric, the rusted box of belongings, they weren't random discoveries. They were part of a pattern, possibly left behind by the same hand that had moved Rosana's remains. Some investigators began to suspect that the killer had been taunting them all along, dropping breadcrumbs across the years to keep the case alive or to exert control over the narrative. Attention turned once again to potential suspects. Old names resurfaced. An ex-boyfriend Rosana had briefly dated, a co-worker rumored to have been infatuated with her, even a transient man seen near Fairview around the time of her disappearance. None had ever been charged, but the possibility that one of them had continued to haunt the family by manipulating the evidence was impossible to ignore. For the community, the confirmation of Rosana's death brought both relief and horror. The long years of uncertainty were over, but the truth was darker than many had feared. Rosana had not run away. She had not vanished into the night by chance. She had been silenced, hidden, and then buried in secrecy. Her family wept as they laid her to rest, finally able to grieve fully after more than a decade of unanswered prayers. But for investigators, the case was not closed. Rosana's death was no longer just a disappearance, it was a homicide. And though they had her remains, they did not yet have her killer. With the discovery of Rosana's remains, Fairview finally had answers, but not the kind anyone had hoped for. Her death was confirmed, her belongings catalogued, her final resting place marked. Yet the larger question, the identity of her killer, remained unanswered. The case that had begun as a disappearance was now officially a homicide, and the weight of that truth cast a new shadow over the town. For Rosana's family, the confirmation ended a decade of uncertainty. They could now grieve openly, without clinging to the faint hope that she might return. Her parents buried her in the town cemetery, the service attended by hundreds who remembered the smiling young woman with dreams of travel and adventure. Tears mixed with relief. The not knowing had been unbearable. But even as her family lowered her into the ground, one thought lingered painfully. Justice had not been served. Investigators pressed on, re-examining evidence, re-interviewing suspects, and chasing new leads. But time had eroded much of the trail. Witnesses' memories had faded, potential suspects had moved away or died, and physical evidence was scarce after more than 10 years exposed to the elements. Though the RCMP vowed to keep the case open, progress was slow, and eventually, the investigation once again slipped into silence. Yet Rosana's story did not fade. In Fairview, her name became synonymous with caution. Parents told their children about her, using her memory as a warning about trust and vulnerability. Her photograph still hung in the local bookstore, candles still lit on anniversaries of her disappearance. She had become part of the town's identity, an enduring symbol of both tragedy and resilience. Nationally, Rosana's case was cited in documentaries and reports on Canada's cold cases. Advocacy groups pointed to her story as evidence of the need for better resources for missing persons investigations, arguing that early missteps in 1999 might have cost valuable time and evidence. Some called her the girl Canada forgot. Others called her the girl Canada must never forget. For her younger sister, now an adult, Rosana's absence became both a burden and a mission. She spoke at schools and community gatherings, urging others never to dismiss the signs of danger and never to give up on missing loved ones. She carried her sister's memory forward, turning grief into a kind of advocacy that kept Rosana's name alive long after the headlines had faded. The mystery of who took Rosana's life still lingers. Was it someone close to her, hiding in plain sight all these years? Or was it a stranger passing through, gone before suspicion could ever fall? Those questions remain unanswered, but they haunt the community to this day. Rosana's story is more than just a crime. It is a reminder of the fragility of safety, the weight of uncertainty, and the importance of remembrance. Though she never returned home, her legacy endures. In the lives she touched, the town that refuses to forget her, and the haunting silence of a truth that remains just out of reach.